That wakes everybody up. Okay. All right, since it's 7 o'clock, I'll go ahead and get started. Notice is hereby given of the regular meeting of the Board of Education of the Town of Westfield in the County of Union, New Jersey, at 7 p.m. on the evening of Tuesday, October 19th, 2021, in Cafeteria B of Westfield High School at 550 Dorian Road, Westfield, New Jersey. Please be advised all attendees must wear masks. The purpose of the meeting is to transact the regular business of the board and to transact any other business to come properly before the board. This is to advise the general public and to instruct that it be recorded in the minutes that in compliance with Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of 1975, entitled the Open Public Meetings Act, the Westfield School Board on Thursday, October 14th, 2021, caused to be posted at the office of the Board of Education located at 302 Elm Street, Westfield, New Jersey, and delivered to the Westfield Leader, the Star Ledger, the Westfield Library, Town Clerk of Westfield, Tap Into Westfield, and Patch.com, a meeting notice setting forth the time, date, and location of this meeting. Dana, could we have a roll call, please?
Sahar Aziz. Michael Beelan.
Here.
Brendan Galligan.
Here.
Rob Garrison.
Here.
Layla Morelli.
Here.
Gretchen Oleg.
Here.
Tara Aporto.
Here.
Sonal Patel.
Here.
Amy Root.
Here.
And Rob, would you lead us in a flag salute tonight?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, and for announcements this evening, Sonal, would you mind starting us off?
Sure. It's Palooza time. The Westfield Municipal Alliance, along with the Westfield High School Dream Team, the Albert Anthony Kale Foundation, and the Matthew Thomas Torriello Memorial Fund, is hosting the 9th Annual Anti-Drug and Alcohol Palooza with specific contests for elementary, intermediate, and high school students. Students in grades 1 through 5 are invited to create an original poster with the theme Westfield, Live Your Best Life, Healthy Choices, Everyday Choices. While students in grades 6 through 8 will create an original poem, and students in grades 9 through 12 will create an original public service announcement, PSA, with the same theme. Deadline to submit is November 19th, 2021. Entry forms and instructions can be found under Health and Welfare on the Community Flyers page on the district website.
Thank you. And would you mind reading the one in front of Sahar's place? Thank you.
The Westfield Municipal Alliance will hold its next meeting tomorrow, Wednesday, October 20th at 7 p.m. at the Westfield Starbucks, 117 Central Avenue. All meetings will offer a virtual option as well. Email coordinator Amy Lewis at alewis@westfieldnj.gov to receive a link to the virtual meeting.
Westfield High School students have received special honors from the College Board National Recognition Programs. Senior Celia Frank has been named a 2021-2022 National African American Scholar. Seniors Taylor Adis, Blake Veretz, Mateo Beltran, John Gonzalez, Manuel Gonzalez, Amira Lee, and Victoria Vega have been named 2021 and 2022 National Hispanic Scholars. We look forward to welcoming these student scholars to a future board meeting for in-person recognition.
Yes. The Westfield Police Department will host Cops and Goblins, a Halloween spectacular, on Sunday, October 31st, from 10 a.m. to 12 noon at Police Headquarters, 425 East Broad Street. There will be candy, face painting, a balloon artist, and emergency vehicles on display, including an Addams Family-inspired police car.
Okay. Gretchen, do you have one?
I do. The College Women's Club of Westfield will hold a virtual session entitled, is that me? Jay, I'm sorry. Okay, sorry. Entitled Need-Based and Merit-Based Financial Aid 101 on Monday, October 25th at 7 p.m. Join guest speaker Susanna McLean, a Westfield area independent education consultant who will help families navigate the college financial aid process. The event is free and open to the public. Registration is required. Visit cwclubwestfield.org to sign up. Details on how to access the virtual session will be sent upon registration. Contact cwc.westfield@gmail.com for more information.
Great. Rob?
The next meeting of the Parent-Teacher Council, or known as PTC, will be held tomorrow, Wednesday, October 20th at 10:15 a.m. in the Board Meeting Room at 302 Elm Street. The PTC is the umbrella organization for all 10 of the Westfield School PTOs. At these monthly meetings, PTO presidents meet with the PTC Board, Superintendent Gonzalez, and a representative of the Board of Education. More information on the PTC, including a meeting schedule, can be found under the Family Resources tab on the district website.
Layla?
Congratulations to the following Westfield High School students who earned perfect scores on recent ACT and SAT subject area tests. They are, for May 2021's SAT, Phoebe Chatowitz for math, and Amy Shao, evidence-based reading and writing. For June 2021 ACT, Taylor Adis, 12th grade English, Eric Harnisher, 12th grade English, David Maimon, 10th grade English, Lindsay Petrowitz, 12th grade English, Mackenzie Wilson, 11th grade English, and Jessica Zdepp, 12th grade reading. For July 2021 ACT, Sophia Regenzia, 12th grade reading. And for summer 2021 SAT, Rowan Baker, June, 12th grade math. James Kaprowski, June, 12th grade math. And Katie Bai, August, 12th grade math.
Thank you. Brendan, do you have?
I have two announcements.
Okay.
We extend our thanks to the 7 candidates who are running for the Westfield Board of Education. Please visit the board election page under the board tab at www.westfieldnjk12.org for candidate profiles, a recording of the recent candidates night, and voter information. And second announcement is Westfield Public Schools will be closed on Thursday, November 4th and Friday, November 5th for the teacher professional days consistent with the NJEA convention. Additionally, students in kindergartens through grade 5 only will have early dismissal days on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of that week, November 1st through 3rd, for parent-teacher conferences.
Great, thank you. The next meeting of the Board of Education will be held on Tuesday, November 16th in Cafeteria B at Westfield High School at 7 p.m. Please enter at the door nearest the back parking lot off Railway Avenue. All attendees are required to wear a mask. The complete agenda will be available on Friday, November 12th, under the board tab at www.westfieldnjk12.org. And now, I have a special announcement, and I'm so excited because we have some students to honor tonight, which is wonderful. On behalf of the entire Board of Education, it is my great pleasure tonight to recognize 2 Westfield High School students who are semifinalists in the 2022 National Merit Scholarship Program. Less than 1% of U.S. high school seniors qualify as National Merit semifinalists. The program names approximately 16,000 students nationwide as semifinalists who show exceptional academic ability and potential for success in rigorous college studies. The semifinalists enter the competition as juniors by taking the preliminary SAT National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test, which serves as a screen of program entrance. The following Westfield High School seniors are among the highest scoring entrants and are eligible to continue in the competition for a National Merit Scholarship. When I call your name, please come up to the front of the room to accept a certificate of recognition from our superintendent, Dr. Gonzalez, and remain there for a group photograph, please. Jillian Strout. Okay, and also Yu-Chin Yang, please. Come on up. Okay, and we're thinking we might actually have them come stand over here in front of the curtain for a better backdrop. So parents, if you want to come up to get a picture, please come on up and as close as you like. Nope, we talked about it, yep. Okay, look this way, please. Just do one. And one more. Okay, hold on. All right. Tremendous. Thank you. All right. Again, congratulations to Jillian and Yuchin for this tremendous achievement. We're so happy to have you back here. Hopefully, this is the beginning of more recognition of student achievements at our meetings, since we haven't really been able to do this for a while. So thank you for joining us. And you're welcome to stay, but we certainly understand if you'd like to get on home to the rest of your evenings. Thanks for joining us, guys. Okay. Okay. All right. And now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Gonzalez for Superintendent's report, please.
Good evening. The presentation on the screen requires my glasses, so. So much better. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for your time and attention this evening. Annually, the State Department of Education requires that school districts provide the Board of Education and the public with updates regarding our efforts to keep our schools safe and secure for our students. In particular, there are two reports that I will be presenting on this evening that speak to the data that we gather on an annual basis and report out to the Department of Education in the areas of violence, vandalism, and harassment and intimidation and bullying. The first is referred to as the SSDS, or the Student Safety Data System, and it's a system that tracks incidences of violence and vandalism, as well as any incidences of harassment, intimidation, and bullying, and the programs and training that go along with it. We are asked to report on those incidents and trainings on a periodic basis. You'll see the periods are divided based upon a school year. So from September to December is period 1, and January through June is period 2. So this evening I'll be presenting on period 2, which represents January to June of this past school year. What you see on the screen is just a table that summarizes the number of incidents at each of our schools, as well as a number of incidents as it relates to those in which a student may have had to be removed from the school because of the nature of the infraction. HIB allegations aren't always conducted in a manner that results in a finding, but certainly if they are alleged to have occurred, we do conduct investigations at the school level that are reported out to the board and subsequently affirmed at each board meeting. In addition, through the HIB efforts of our anti-bullying specialists and the anti-bullying coordinators, we also conduct trainings of our staff as well as conduct programs for our students. And I do want to just draw the attention to the fact that this is what is being reported based upon the second half of last school year. As we know, last school year was not a standard or typical year, and therefore those incidents may seem low to you because we were not in person, we were not at full capacity. However, they do represent the fact that as a school district, we still continue to investigate and follow up with incidents when they are brought to our attention. So each year, our administration will continue to review these data in order to make determinations as to what we can continue to do to keep our schools safe and secure for everyone. Likewise, the New Jersey Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights, the ABR, requires that school districts engage in activities that allow our students to feel safe and secure in our schools and free from harassment, intimidation, and bullying. That happens in a variety of ways, including, but not limited to, our investigations. But as I mentioned before, it also includes what we do to train our students and our staff in order to ensure that they know what is required of them in the act in the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights Act. So each year, the school districts throughout the state of New Jersey are asked to self-grade their efforts in 8 areas, and we'll run through them quickly in a moment. And what you will see here are the official grades that were confirmed by the Department of Education not too long ago. The Board of Education received our self-evaluation last year, so what you see is actually confirmation of what was submitted probably about a year ago, or maybe about 10 months ago. You'll notice that the date on this represents not this past school year, but the school year before. So by way of data, this does represent data that is 2 years old, because the nature of the reporting cycle will have schools report on the prior complete year's data actually starting this coming December and January. We'll be reporting out for this prior school year, the 2021 school year. So we're always going to be reporting out the final grades about a year and a half after it occurs, but nevertheless, it still represents efforts that reflect the work that we're doing, and it will be an ongoing report as we conduct our self-assessment for the coming year and the coming months. As I mentioned before, there are 8 core elements that schools work with their safety and climate teams, culture and climate teams, in order to assess their efforts in response to the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights. Those 8 elements are seen here. As you can see, programs, approaches, or initiatives, along with training on the board-approved HIB policy, represent 2 of the main categories. Other instruction and training programs, as well as curriculum instruction on HIB and related information and skills, are 2 additional areas. And then when it looks at our ability to implement the investigative aspects of the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights, they look at making sure that we have appropriate personnel, we have an appropriate procedure in both investigation and reporting. Later on in the slide deck, you'll see a link to our webpage that has additional information, including the pretty well written and thought out anti-bullying policy that the board has that goes into much greater detail in all of these areas and what's expected of the schools. In each of those 8 core areas where we are expected to assign our own grades, based upon whether or not we meet the requirements set forth in the rubric that is provided to us, or whether or not we meet or exceed those requirements. When you take those 8 categories, when you take all of the different point values, there is a maximum grade attainment of 78 possible points. So on the next slide, you're going to see, again, a table that rates each of our schools. And what we're going to do is make sure that we post this presentation to the website so that anyone that would like to look at the data more deeply could certainly have the ability to do so. But I do want to orient you to the table that you see. Once again, on the left side are all the schools broken down by each of the 8 core elements across the top. Each of those elements are graded according to the rubric that was provided, and the total grade is represented on the far right column. And as I mentioned before, 78 represents the highest. And at the far right bottom, you see that the district, on average, scored approximately 70 points. This chart, this table, is something that we look at each and every year with a fresh new set of eyes. And we do so in order to identify those areas that we believe we could continue to improve upon, and certainly those areas of strength we want to continue to maintain. So in areas that we do not feel that we are currently performing at our strongest, this set of data provides us with the disaggregated opportunity to really pinpoint and target our efforts in the right places. So once again, in the coming weeks and actually months, we will be soliciting the self-assessment grades from our schools for the 2021 school year, which will be submitted to the board at a future board meeting for approval for submission to the DOE. And then around this time next year, I look forward to presenting those official reports as well. This grade report is also available, as are multiple grade reports from prior years. There we go, on our district website. So you'll see under the district information menu, there is a harassment, intimidation, and bullying subpage. And to the right, you'll see the information that's available on that subpage, including, but not limited to, our policies, contact information for our anti-bullying specialists at each school, as well as the self-assessments that have been conducted over the past 4 years. So last but not least, all of this work is really in an effort for us as Westfield Public Schools to make sure that our students are able to be educated. Whoa. There's no way to pause it?
Respect means you have to show empathy and be kind to one another. Respect means to me that everyone should be treated equally.
Respect means so many different things to me, but off the top of my head, respect is treating others the way you want to be treated and listening to others when they're talking or telling you something.
To me, respect means to treat someone or something the way that they want to be treated and not how I think that they should be treated.
In Westfield, we call this the week of extra respect because we pride ourselves on spending every day of every week during the school year modeling and teaching how students can respect themselves, respect each other, and also respect their surroundings. This week, we call attention to skills and strategies students can employ to show respect and to show they understand respect and use throughout the school.
To me, respect means showing that you value and appreciate other people's opinions and beliefs, and that you can lift others up and admire them.
So let us create inner circles all around us for the rest of our days. Let our pyramid ripple out in a million little ways that I surround you. Make your circle bigger. Include more people in your circles.
Respect is something that can be applied to anybody of all ages, genders, races, ethnicities, anybody, and it's kind of just showing someone through your actions, your words, anything like that, that you value what they have to say and what they have to offer to the world.
When we think about respect, I think the most important thing that we have to remember is about valuing the people for who they are and what they are.
The place for hate. This will be our second year. By spreading awareness is making everyone more respectful of each other and inclusive of each other. And I think No Place for Hate does a really good job of that by bringing everyone together and being really accepting of everyone.
To me, respect means to use manners and treat everything and everyone with kindness and to value everyone and everything, including yourself.
Respect means creating a classroom environment that is warm and caring and nurturing and welcoming. My kids deserve that respect. Respect means to me being a caring and compassionate person. It also means doing the right thing even when it's hard to do.
I think it's important to respect yourself too, because if you don't respect yourself, then you're not going to want to treat others how to respect others. It doesn't need to be a person. You could help save water, or you could pick up garbage. You could respect the plants.
For me, respect means caring for others, always listening before talking,
and being kind no matter the circumstance. If everyone respects each other, we can make the world a better place.
I don't think I could have said it better myself, so I'm glad the video took it from there. So that concludes my presentation this evening.
So much. Always nice to see student faces. Here is good, up on screen is good as well, and I think that video will also be part of some things people can find on the website. I know it's a bit of a challenge in this big of a space when you're sitting at the back of the room to see all the details of what's up on these screens, so you will be able to find it later on the website if you want to double check what we show today. All right. Okay. Moving on, tonight is our point on the agenda when we recognize the public for comments on agenda items only. There will be a second opportunity for public comment on any item that you wish to comment on. So this portion is just for agenda items that we'll be voting on. I think we still have some paper copies of the agenda there, or are they all gone, Marianne? Can you tell at the table? But you can also find the agenda on the district website if you have any questions about what's coming up. And I'll just go ahead and read the comments that we say at the beginning of these portions now. During this portion of the meeting, district residents and staff are invited to address the Board of Education on agenda items only. The board requests that individuals state their name and address for the record and asks that all remarks be directed to the board president. The board asks that members of the public be courteous and mindful of the rights of other individuals when speaking. Specifically, comments regarding personnel matters are discouraged and cannot be responded to by the board. Students and employees have specific legal rights afforded by the laws of New Jersey. The board bears no responsibility, nor will it be liable for any comments made by members of the public. If a matter concerning a district staff member is of interest or concern to a resident, the matter should be referred to the responsible building principal, superintendent of schools, or the Board of Education, either by telephone, letter, or email. Although the board may not respond to items raised during the public forum, all public comments will be considered. Please note that if any member of the public becomes disruptive during the meeting, the board president may terminate the participant's statement. Continued disruptions may result in removal from the meeting or adjournment of the meeting. Each speaker's statements will be limited to 3 minutes in duration, and we do have a timer on an iPad up here to help guide you as you make your comments at the podium. In previous meetings, we've had a number of people who wanted to speak, and in the past I have said, I'll call on you and then come up. In the interest of time, if you'd like to form a line along this outer wall of the room, socially distanced, of course, then I can call you up and we'll save a little bit of time of people walking up. So, looks like we have at least one person who would like to come to the podium. Mr. George, you can be first.
Before Mr. George comes up, I just wanted to ask Dr. Gonzalez a question about the SSD report. It says incidents leading to removal. Does removal mean expulsion, or does it mean suspension as well?
It would include an suspension as well.
Okay, so it's removal from the school doesn't mean indefinitely?
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Sorry, I should have paused for questions earlier. Okay, any other questions on those reports before we move on to public comment? No? Okay, Mr. George, go ahead.
Thank you. Kyle George, 605 Short Hills Court. First of all, I want to say congratulations to the merit semifinalists. They're not here anymore, but congratulations. Also want to start by thanking the Franklin administration and the Westfield Police Department for keeping our children safe from the criminal who broke into nearby homes today. So thanks to those folks. On the finance agenda tonight, attachment 15 is a line item for a conference attended by at least one teacher. It's entitled Baseball History is American History, and it's given in New Brunswick, New Jersey, which sounds really interesting since I love our national pastime. The description in attachment 15 says, quote, historic segregation and ethnic discrimination will be examined as they conflict with the egalitarian and democratic ideals celebrated in the early years of the game, end quote. Major League Baseball does indeed have an extremely unfortunate history of segregation. However, I'm curious how this course will be applied to Westfield students. That's my first question. Googling the course, I see it's at Rutgers, and the instructor is named Norman Markowitz, PhD, of the Rutgers History Department. Dr. Markowitz's bio states prominently that, quote, "I write and teach from a Marxist perspective," end quote. That's really interesting. The district seems to prefer teaching continuing education that is taught or derived from a Marxist perspective. We know this from everything we've learned about the CRT-derived professional development that took place in 2020, for example. CRT, of course, being in part a Marxist philosophy. So my second and final question is, when will I start seeing some PD and conferences that teach from the capitalist, pro-American perspective? You know, things that show American capitalism, things that show that American capitalism has made human life significantly better over the last 200 years and improved the standard of living, while Marxism has always failed. Thank you.
Yep, come on up. That's okay. Mr. Bonaccio, I think Ms. Wickens has beat you to the punch, but you can be next.
She usually does, that's fine. I'm faster than you. Hi, Mary Wickens, 111 Tudor Oval. I quickly looked through the school closure plan that's coming up. So I just had a couple of questions for now, and I might have some later when I really get to read through it. But first, thanks for putting it all out into a, discernible packet here, including separating it by grades. Also, thank you for the section on the students with disabilities. I know from some of my clients last year that was kind of a difficult situation to get their IEPs completed during remote learning. It was difficult in my school district as well, especially related services, so thank you for putting that out there. English language learners also, thank you for including that. I just had a question for the gifted and talented in the younger grades, if you were going to add something in that about their program if school's closed, or you don't have to answer me, but I didn't see it in here, and maybe it is, but I just briefly went through it. Hopefully we won't have to use this again, but thank you again for putting it out there. Thanks.
Hey, Rob Bonaccio, 528 Forest Avenue in Westfield. I'm going to follow up right on that. I took a look at the plan as well. I'm definitely very appreciative that it's out there. It's one of the things that I think would have helped tremendously with a lot of parent questions last year to understand exactly where it was we were going with it. And I think a lot of the angst that parents had about what we were doing came from not having enough information about it, frankly. But there were a couple of things that came to mind as I was reading it. Most prominent among them is I'm not 100% sure that we're guaranteeing live instruction to our intermediate school students under this plan. And I say this because there's a number of ways that instruction is referred to in the different grade levels, which I do appreciate having them broken out. So pre-K and kindergarten have daily live circle times. First and second grade have guided instructional sections, guided instructional routines and live instruction / interaction. Live instruction / interaction for 3 and 5. Our intermediate students get an engaging learning experience, links to live and recorded lessons, and live streams, which are defined earlier as 20 minutes with a component of direct instruction. Otherwise, they get lessons that are accessible by email, Google Classroom, or other means of electronic communication. And these live streams are made available to all students. I like the high school one a lot. It says provide live instruction during virtual class time. That was good and clear. And I'm not quite sure why we can't be that clear with the rest of it. When different words are used to describe different things, I don't get the sense that when my intermediate student is home, in the event we have to do this, which I hope we don't, they're going to have a classroom experience as close to what it is they're going to get with live instruction in the classroom as they can. And I think that's what we need to do. We can't have live stream, we can't have something they're going to check in. These aren't podcasts, this is their school. And the suggestion that I'm getting from this is that we're leaving the door open to that, and I don't think that needs to be there. So hopefully as we discuss this, we can clarify that. The other thing I don't see are standards for returns or movements to hybrid instruction once that becomes available, standards for what triggers this or turns it off, and I don't see see anything in here about what leeway and support we're providing to teachers when this happens. We should be collecting data now for teachers who may need leave time, who have their own kids, who are going to be facing the same challenges that our parents are going to face. They may need time off. They may need differential classroom timing. What happens if one of them is subject to any of the health issues? I just don't see the care for our teachers in this, which is obviously going to affect our students. They need to be kept as normal as possible. Our teachers are the folks who are the face of the district. They're the ones who are going to be on the front lines, with all due respect to everybody who's planning, keeping our students as accommodated and feeling as much as they are normal as they can. Last thing, we're very firm on the extracurriculars. I think there was a question at a forum I was at last night, how do we get people back involved in extracurriculars? I think we should also, while we're here, assess how extracurriculars can be modified for online learning in the event that we have to do this, or online performance. Thanks.
On an agenda item, public comment? No? Okay. All right. As I said, there will be another portion of the meeting later on when you can comment on agenda items or anything else. Okay? So moving along, I would like the board to approve the... Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, please. Yes. Sorry, Doctor.
No, thank you. I just wanted to quickly respond. The purpose of the school closure plan is to be able to provide the Department of Education with a general framework for what we would put in place in the event that we had to shut down our schools again, as we did back in the spring. So it's actually a very targeted set of circumstances that the Department of Education was asking us to update based upon what we had submitted back in the spring of 2020. It does not account for every detail, because as we learned from the pandemic, there were a lot of curveballs that were thrown to us, so that we were not required to sort of adjust to every particular instance and nuance that may occur, but rather provide an overarching framework to ensure that there would be continuity of instruction in some form or fashion. The details of what would be expected of us have not been updated per se, so we were really using our prior experience and the prior guidance as the framework that we would work with. So with that being said, there was a question about gifted and talented there at the elementary level in particular. So there is a provision for grades 3 and 5 gifted and talented, whereby the instructional program would be differentiated using varied materials, and we would certainly ensure that they would be included in our curricular experiences along with the other grades as well. The details of what that would look like, again, would remain to be seen depending on where we are in the curriculum, where we are in the school year. So that's the reason why you wouldn't see that level of detail in a plan such as this. Likewise, there's also questions regarding live instruction at the intermediate level, how it may or may not differ from what is seen at the high school level. And again, this plan was developed based upon the feedback from the school staff and what they found to be most effective and most reasonable, and what they would be able to implement in the case of a complete school closure. This does not mean that they could not or would not provide live streaming all day, every day, but it certainly represents what is manageable and feasible in the experience that they had in the spring of 2020. If we ever found ourselves in the unfortunate situation where we would have to shut down the district again, this certainly represents the framework that we would use to then revisit and adjust and modify as needed based upon the circumstances at that particular time. So for that reason, there are no requirements in the plan for standards for returning in part via hybrid or anything else, because again, the public health data at that time, the direction from the Department of Health, those would all be the determining factors that we would follow, and we're not required components of this plan. The question about teachers, a very valid question, and we certainly value the health, well-being, and support for our teachers. So it would be part and parcel of what we would be considering in our work in such an event of a district-wide school closure. However, this plan does not require that we detail what those supports would be. But once again, based upon our experience over the past several months into the last year and a half, we would be prepared to provide greater support and specificity to our teachers so that they could help navigate the waters as we would experience them at that time. And then last but not least, again, the question about extracurricular and what that would look like in an online fashion was not required for the plan, but once again, based upon our experiences, we learned how to transition our extracurricular offerings to an online format, in some cases better than others, I'm sure, but certainly it was something that came after a bit of time in order to ensure that our focus on our educational continuity remained in the forefront. And as we saw our work continuing for greater and greater durations, then it allowed us to start to pivot other areas as well. So once again, we would certainly look to be mindful of what the duration of the school closure would be, and then adjust our plan accordingly. And that's it.
Okay. That helps a lot. Thank you. Thank you for putting that in context and explaining the nature of the report itself and what it's intended to do. Thank you. Are there any other comments from board members? Sorry, I don't want to move along if I'm missing something. Okay. Then I would like the board to, did we approve the minutes of the board meeting on October 5th, 2021? Can I have a second?
Second.
Great. Thanks, Brendan. All in favor of approving the minutes? Aye with a hand. Okay. Anyone's abstaining? Okay. Thank you. All right. Personnel. I would like the board to consider personnel items 1 through 22. Could I have a second? Thank you, Rob. All right. I think Dr. Gonzalez, you have an item to comment on. Is that right?
This evening, I am announcing with regret the retirement of Teresa Whitehead, head secretary at Franklin School. Teresa was a valued substitute for 4 years until becoming a secretary and then head secretary in the office at Franklin. For the last 17 years, her service has been marked by warmth, humor, and great dedication to Franklin students and their families, as well as the staff and the administration. She is quick to work far beyond her official duties to support anyone in need. We wish her a long and happy retirement, which we know will include visits to her new granddaughter in Ireland.
Terrific. Okay. Any other comments from board members or questions? No? We'll do a roll call, Dana?
Yes. Brendan Galligan?
Yes.
Rob Garrison?
Yes.
Layla Morelli?
Yes.
Gretchen Olig?
Yes.
Tara Porto?
Yes.
Sonal Patel?
Yes.
Amy Root?
Yes. Okay. Thanks very much. We'll move on to facilities. Mike?
Yes, I have no report this evening. We will have our next meeting on October 22nd, which is Friday.
All right then, thank you. Long-range planning, Gretchen?
Yeah, so, Mike was too fast for me. I was trying to pull up my notes. So we did have a long-range planning committee earlier this evening. The bulk of the conversation was, again, about full-day kindergarten, and I think that we sort of revisited where we were prior to the pandemic, and some of what we've been doing is sort of catching Dr. Gonzalez up to speed with work, and it's been a conversation. I mean, I've been on the board for 10 years. I feel like we've been having this conversation for at least 7 or 8 of those years. So there was a recommendation from the committee that the administration sort of circle back to the plans that we had in place pre-COVID, which were facilities that would need construction in order to accommodate the 14 or 16 classrooms that we would need to build for our kindergartners to be full day. And then hopefully at our next meeting in November, we can take a look at those again, make sure that we're in agreement that the plan that we previously were looking at, and I think had even presented to the public in brief about building onto Jefferson and Washington is still the appropriate way to proceed. We have, and then potentially, looking at a timeline to bring a referendum to the public to vote on as to whether they are in favor of us securing a bond to build those facilities or to add on to those facilities for the classrooms. It's all very tricky because once the classrooms are built, they will need to be staffed, and so that requires an additional vote by the public to allow the board to exceed the cap on our operating budget to hire additional staff. Paraprofessionals and other individuals who would be needed to teach are now full-day kindergartners. And so the timing of it is a little bit tricky because we can't really have a simultaneous vote because then we would have funds in the operating budget but no staff to hire or no place to put them. And so that continues to be an ongoing conversation, and I think it's going to require a lot of conversation with the public as we start to talk about, a potential referendum and what that will look like. And we did talk about whether that conversation should be paired with sort of a larger look at the facilities in the district and the overall facilities needs. But given the length of time it would take to have a really thorough conversation on the district as a whole, I think the committee's recommendation is that we try and move more expeditiously on just the kindergarten piece sooner rather than later. So I appreciate there's nothing definitive except for the fact that we've sort of refocused and unfortunately, opportunities that may have existed immediately prior to COVID to sort of partner with some private locations are no longer available to us. So we're going to loop back and keep moving the ball forward with respect to that. We have a meeting on November 16th, before our next board meeting. And if any of the other committee members, want to chime in, please do.
Yeah, just to echo Gretchen's point about the complexity of a multi-vote, when we talked about this 3 years ago, the timeline we were looking at was a spring referendum vote, probably May for the construction, and then 18 months later, the public would have to vote again to increase the operating budget, because that can only happen at a November general election. So to be as close as possible to construction being completed, it would require a spring vote so that schools can open 2 years later in the spring, in the fall, and then November, right before schools would start, we'd have to go again. So the classrooms would be almost completed, and then we'd have to ask the voters again. And we tried working with our legislators to change the law to allow us to ask the voters to vote once, preemptively increase the budget. That legislation has died in committee. But they did introduce legislation on our behalf to get that done. It didn't go anywhere, unfortunately.
And we'll try again, right?
Yeah,
to speak to them and
keep trying. Legislative races, the leadership in both houses is going to change. And among board members, we have connections to different people all over the state. So we're going to continue to reach out and try and get something done to make the process as streamlined as possible without taking away the voters' say in the matter.
Yeah, and it can't be an excuse, but it is an explanation for why it has taken us a while to get to the point where we can sort of pull the trigger with a public referendum. Lots of towns that are similar to us have found ways to get around this problem, either because they have declining enrollment and they have additional classroom space available and don't need that separate capital referendum to do the building, or in some cases, I'm not sure how, they have found ways to create space in their operating budget for that kind of staff. But I think because of the nature of kindergarten in Westfield, we have, I think at the moment, less than half of that grade cohort in half-day kindergarten in our public schools. So the number of additional classrooms and therefore number of additional teachers that we would need are a lot more than what similar towns have been able to do without this kind of two-question conundrum.
Yeah, we'd need approximately 3 times the number of classrooms, if not a little bit more, which means 3 times the number of kindergarten teachers. And that's not something we can pull out of thin air out of the budget. I mean, Dana does magic. I don't know how she does it every year, but that's not realistic.
I just want to add, part of the the answer to that question is how other districts may find money in an operating budget is the slide that I show every year of our cost per pupil. And you'll remember how far to the left we are on that slide. So the districts that are on the other end of that graph have a lot of room in the budget to make adjustments that we don't have. And that's the problem. We have also tried to get our legislators to acknowledge that the difference in the starting cost per pupil, the cap on somebody at $10,000 a pupil versus $20,000 a pupil is a huge impact, and they recognize that, but
Oh, yeah,
unfortunately,
they're
they
very
haven't
happy
changed
to
a lot.
acknowledge how lean our budget is. They're just not going to do anything to help us.
Also, Amy, I'll just add too, being that the pandemic has hit us and we're no different than anyone else, as we look at this moving forward, we also now have to factor in potential for additional costs related to the construction project. So some of the numbers we've looked at in the past will certainly have to be revisited and factored in, and that's something that'll be made clear to the voters if we get to that point. And also, I don't know if this was mentioned before, but one of the benefits of doing a bond referendum is that you also get a 40% match from the state. So it's really important to keep that in mind as we're looking at the direct costs to voters here in New Jersey, in Westfield, as opposed to costs that are offset through aid from the state through the SDA and the Department of Education.
And luckily, that 40% match isn't dependent on SDA funds or anything else. It's guaranteed to us in statute.
All right. So watch this space, right, as we go forward. Yeah, okay. Great, thank you very much, Gretchen. All right, policies?
Yes.
Brendan?
Ask the board to approve policy item number 1. Can I have a second? Thank you, Sonal. This is to approve the revised district public health related closures preparedness plan that we approved at our last meeting 2 weeks ago. There is exactly one line added to the previous plan. I have it highlighted here. And it's to specifically call out that all schools in the district will provide a minimum of 4 hours of instruction daily, excluding lunch and recess. The rest of the document is identical, other than that one line that was added to it at the state's request. Any questions from anybody? All right, Dana?
Yes.
Brendan Galligan?
Yes.
Rob Garrison?
Yes.
Layla Morelli?
Yes.
Gretchen Olig?
Yes.
Tara Porto?
Yes.
Sonal Patel?
Yes.
Amy Root?
Yep.
And the policy committee is meeting next Wednesday.
Okay. All right, curriculum. There's only one curriculum item tonight. I'd like the board to consider that item. Could I get a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Brendan. No actual curriculum documents yet. We have our next meeting on Thursday morning, and we'll actually be talking about courses and speaking with administrators. Our previous meeting was really more a discussion about scheduling. But we do have two field trips to approve for the marching band and one for Spanish conversation class at the high school, which both of my sons did and enjoyed very much. So I'm glad to see that it continues to be something that they do. Any comments or questions? No? Okay, roll call.
Mike Beelan?
Yes.
Brendan Galligan? Rob Garrison?
Yes.
Layla Morelli?
Yes.
Gretchen Olig?
Yes.
Tara Porto?
Yes.
Sonal Patel?
Yes.
Amy Root?
Yes. Okay, and as I said, our next meeting is Thursday morning. We're going to do a remote meeting for this session this month, and we'll have more to talk about at our next meeting. Thanks. Okay, and finance. Rob?
Yes, thank you, Amy. We have items number 1 through 24. Can I get a second or a motion for that? Thank you, Brendan. As I normally do, I'll point out a few things just so we can give some background information and also give some thanks. So items 1 through 9 mostly deal with some of the construction projects that we've been talking about over the last few board meetings, which is upgrades to our HVAC systems. So you'll see that in there. And I know it's a bit more than we normally have, but that's a great thing. There are a number of items that I do also want to read off so that we can thank folks for that. So item number 17 is to approve submission of a grant from the Westfield Coalition for the Arts for the amount of $577 to purchase 2 speakers with stands for outdoor events benefiting Wilson Elementary School's music department. Also, item number 18 is a grant from Westfield Coalition for the Arts for the amount of $577 to also purchase 2 speakers for Jefferson Elementary School's music department. And item number 19, also from the Westfield Coalition for the Arts, for the amount of $603.99, is to purchase new music folders benefiting Westfield High School's orchestra students. And then we have 5 more again, so bear with me, because I do think it's important to give thanks. Item number 20 is a donation of 3,240 bottles of hand sanitizer from the Act of Humanity charity for the district. Item number 21 is a donation from Mr. and Mrs. Jacobs, grandparents of 2 Franklin Elementary School students, in the amount of $500 to purchase items for Mr. Pask and Mrs. Vaglio's classrooms. Item number 22 is a donation of $650 from Friends of Susan Snoffer, hopefully I'm saying that correct, to purchase books in her memory for the Wilson Elementary School Library. Susan Snoffer was a longtime teacher at Wilson Elementary School. Item number 23 is an anonymous donation of school supplies worth $868 for the classrooms of Mrs. Palmer and Mrs. Gazillo at Lincoln School. And lastly, a donation of $6,659 from the Westfield School Boosters Association for the Westfield High School baseball team to purchase a baseball batting turtle and safety L screen. So thank you so much for those donations. Dana, can we get a roll call, please?
Mike Beelan? Yes. Brendan Galligan? Yes. Rob Garrison?
Yes.
Leila Morelli?
Yes.
Gretchen Oleg? Yes. Tara Porto? Yes. Soma Patel?
Yes.
Amy Root?
The Finance Committee did meet last Friday. I didn't provide a report to the board because mostly what we spoke about was a continuation of last month's Finance Committee meeting surrounding health insurance and other related issues. I don't think we have do we have a committee meeting set up next?
We do in November.
Okay, sometime in November. Yeah, sorry about that, I don't have the exact date, but it's usually a Friday morning, so I'll get that information out. And it's not this week, because I think we already have 4 committee meetings this week, so. So it's the 12th. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay. Technology, Gretchen?
No report tonight, thank you.
Report, okay. All right, we have a couple items listed under notes for the record that I would like the board to make sure they see. And then I think we've moved a couple things there, just some minor changes to the way the agenda flows, just items that are there for people to note, but don't need full vote. And then we have, do we have any unfinished business? No. Any new business? No. Okay. Liaison reports? Does anyone have any? No?
Yeah.
Okay.
I always have a liaison report. Last Wednesday, attended the Union County School Boards Association meeting, and the keynote speaker was our very own Mary Ann McGann, who gave a wonderful presentation on communications to the district. I believe that's going to be circulated to every school board in the county. The information was wonderful, so thank you, Mary Ann.
I tuned in remotely and got to hear most of it, so knowing I could follow up with you later if I needed to, so that's great. And always nice to have our staff highlighted throughout the district for their professional expertise, so that's great. I attended a high school PTSO meeting last Thursday, and we were able to meet in person in a large space upstairs in the high school, and it was really nice to be able to be back and see, normal, pretty close to normal operations of the school, and to hear the parents on the PTSO talking about kind of normal type activities, how to celebrate homecoming, what would be safe, what would not be safe, could they do a pep rally, could they not do a pep rally, and so it was great. It was, really encouraging to be part of that. And I think probably most of the PTOs at the schools are going through versions of that, of trying to pick up where they left off to the extent possible, but still be mindful of safety concerns. So I expect to hear a little bit more from Franklin this week. As a matter of fact, I'll be attending one of their meetings on Friday. So if nothing else, then, no one else? Okay, all right. So now is our second public comment portion of the meeting. This one is for comments on any items. It doesn't have to be related to an agenda item. But again, just to reemphasize, please state your name and address for the record. Please direct your comments to me and not to individual board members or staff. Please be courteous and mindful of the rights of other individuals when speaking. Comments regarding personnel matters are discouraged and cannot be responded to by the board. Students and employees have specific legal rights afforded by the laws of New Jersey. The board bears no responsibility, nor will it be liable for any comments made by members of the public. If a matter concerning a district staff member is of interest or concern to a resident, the matter should be referred to the responsible building principal, superintendent of schools, or the Board of Education, either by telephone, letter, or email. Although the board may not respond to items raised during the public forum, all public comments will be considered. All right, each speaker's statement will be limited to 3 minutes in duration, and we have our timer ready to go. So please come on up, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Jerome Fader. I live at 789 Knollwood Terrace, just behind Edison Field. I'm a 44-year resident, and I want to speak a little bit about the Edison Field project, and I'm looking for some help. And with your permission, I'd like to address my comment a little bit more broadly, because I'm looking for, I'm starting something of a survey with respect to finding field. Basically, I'm focusing on the lighting in the school fields, and I'm trying to find examples of other fields that are lit. And so far, I've got Sid Fay, Oak Ridge Park, and Scotch Plains High School, and I'm looking for suggestions of other fields that I might be able to examine that, basically where the lighting has been installed and is, relative, it hasn't had much impact on the neighborhood. I guess it's a lot of people have been saying that the new LED lights are a lot better. So I wanted part of the reason for undertaking this is to basically see some of the fields that are lit that way. The preliminary results, and I want to get some more suggestions, that the new lights do seem to be better than the old ones, but they're not magic. And they're nowhere near where they would need to be suitable for a site like Edison. So, and I guess one of the things, I visited Oak Ridge Park last night, and I guess the lights there were basically something like 100 times brighter than they would have needed to be. And there's some details to that, and maybe at some future date I can fill them in. I have not been able to find any activity at Scotch Plains High School. I visited twice, but I'm going to keep going back there until I can find some games going on. I'll briefly summarize some of the problems in the September 20th revised plan. The people who did the design, like Spiesel, to try to cram everything in, they installed the lights right at the property boundary, which is not allowed in Westfield. And one of the things they did is they put some stadium lights within a little over 15 feet from the bedroom window of an autistic child. The kind of lights that I saw at Oak Ridge won't meet Westfield needs. I'm still waiting to get the Scotch Plains information. And again, this is a work in progress, and I'm looking for suggestions from anybody who can offer, because I guess I purchased some light measuring equipment, and I'd like to just visit the fields and then report back to you. So please contact me if you have some suggestions. Thank you very much.
My name is Emily Barker, 434 Longfellow. As many of you know, I'm running for the Board of Ed. I just wanted to say a few words. I'm not a politician. I'm just a mom who takes a strong interest in what her children are learning at school. As a parent, I strongly believe in teaching children to appreciate and respect diversity. Diverse cultures, races, genders, ability, and opinions. I believe in teaching my children that all forms of bias and discrimination are wrong, and I believe that teaching our children all of that in a unifying way is the right way to go. I have celebrated Diwali in India. I have celebrated Chinese New Year in Queens with friends. I've sat Shiva. I've attended many Seders with friends and relatives. Celebrate our differences. That is what I stand for. I believe my job as a parent is to teach my children to respect and appreciate those who are the same and those who are different, and learn as much as they can, especially about those who are different. What I don't stand for is teaching our children about diversity in a divisive way. For example, teaching them to judge each other solely by the color of their skin. I teach my children not to look at those who are different and make assumptions or jump to conclusions. I teach them to not judge a book by its cover. Read that book from cover to cover and find out what that book is about. Racism, anti-Semitism, any form of bias is wrong. That is what I teach my children. For me, teaching them that any other way to live would represent a failure to me as a parent. I would like to ask this board to consider my approach to parenting as it assesses the approach to diversity that the schools have chosen and honestly evaluate which one will ultimately result in the most tolerant, non-judgmental, and open-minded children. Why not consider modeling the execution of the DEI mandate after the week of respect that we just saw? Thank you.
My name is Tim Eaton. I live at 762 Knollwood Terrace. Last week, I sent an email to the Board of Education email address, and I hope you had a chance to read it. The subject was increasing field capacity and preserving our neighborhoods. The current Edison plan calls for artificial turf and lighting towers. This will not preserve our neighborhoods. This will cause more noise at night, deterioration of quality of life and home values, excess parking on streets, traffic congestion, safety issues for pedestrians and motorists, flooding, contamination, more injuries on the artificial turf field, and exposure to carcinogens, greenhouse gas emissions. We need to increase field capacity through more field space at various locations and researching better ways to preserve and maintain our grass fields, and not by increasing hours at night using lights. I tried to put together an example that might help someone who really doesn't live close to these locations right now, and to try to get a better understanding what we might be going through if some of these field plans were implemented. As an example, if your neighbor decided to get rid of their natural grass lawn due to maintenance issues and the time spent, seeding, cutting grass, fertilizing, and replacing their lawn with artificial turf, which would cause flooding, pollutants, carcinogens, etc., with more noise and excess parking and traffic on your street, you would probably not want this. Well, this is kind of what we're going to be going through if the Edison plan, as it's currently put together, was implemented. I think of Edison School as a neighbor of ours, and this plan will do this and more to our neighborhoods. It will be far worse than the example I just mentioned. Natural grass fields at various locations with no lights is the right outcome. Increasing field capacity and preserving neighborhoods should not be mutually exclusive, and one should not be sacrificed for the other. Please support our grass fields and no lights. This will preserve our neighborhoods and provide the needed field capacity. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Janet Onishi. I'm also from Knollwood Terrace at 759. Many people move to Westfield for the family-friendly atmosphere, the beautiful treed lots, an exciting town, and the excellent school system. Many select homes within walking distance of a school. Never in our wildest dreams did we ever think that the fields behind Edison would be developed into a sports facility that is open for business until 10 p.m. every night. I feel like we're in a catch-22, though. We have read in the Parks and Recreation Master Plan that new ways to fund the department are required. It is proposed to have income-generating events like rental fees, tournaments, food trucks, and other approaches to pay for our parks, recreation, and now athletic fields. If you sign the LOI with the town to allow the town to develop the Edison fields, do you lose oversight of the use of the fields? Based on conversations with a representative from the WSA, the town has use of the fields until 6 p.m. on weekdays. I ask you, what happens from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. and from dawn to opening of school and summertime? And what about weekends? Sports teams and physical fitness companies use the Keeler Stadium. Many times there is loud music exceeding the allowable decibels during daytime. There is no oversight, and residential neighborhoods should not have to live with safety concerns related to traffic, parking, security worries, and even noise until 10 p.m. The town just shut down a business on Carlton Road based on renting a swimming pool, where neighbors had to call the police and councilman contract to stop the insanity. Please, don't create a situation like this on school property in residential neighborhoods. The Edison neighbors know and accept the school sports and the band practices behind Edison after school. The activity ends at dusk. If the Edison project goes through, can the Board of Education set common sense rules that outline usage of their fields on weekdays and weekends? Someone needs to think about the needs of the family neighborhoods surrounding Edison. I ask the Board of Education, please, can you assume this responsibility? I'm not convinced that the town will, and I thank you for your attention.
Hi, my name is Kristen Wilson. I live at 13 Normandy Drive. I wanted to speak about something a little different tonight. I actually sent an email to all of you this afternoon, and I wanted to speak about some traffic incidents that I saw this afternoon in just a span of about 20 minutes at dismissal. First, I was waiting for my kids on Shadow Lawn Drive, and we saw a teenage girl, presumably a Westfield high school student, who was riding her bike home from school, nearly get hit by a car backing out of a driveway. The girl came around the corner from Rahway Avenue onto Shadow Lawn, and the driver backing up, I'm assuming, didn't have a clear view of the car because there were cars parked on both sides of the street right up into the corner, and the girl on the bike was literally behind the driver when the driver slammed on her brakes. So now I get my kids, I come around the corner onto Rahway Avenue, going toward Edison School. As usual, there are cars backed up down the street. There's kids walking on both sides. There's kids crossing back and forth to Keller, the busy intersection at Grove Street. The car in front of me, a parent apparently couldn't be bothered to wait. So now, in the midst of all these kids walking, she makes a U-turn right in the middle of Rahway Avenue. Continue a little bit further, going to Normandy Drive. Now there's a kid that I'm going to guess was probably a middle schooler on a bike, and now he's on Rahway, wants to cross the side streets, doesn't even stop at the curb, just rides right out, and I see this all the time. Like, I can't even count how many times in the 9 years that I've lived here that I see kids doing this, because, you know what, they're kids, they're wrong, you know, it's the wrong thing to do, but they're kids. I've been seeing this for years and years, and in the past I've reached out to the Westfield Police, Dr. Bolton, Dr. Dolan, the mayor, the town council, but nothing has changed. And then tonight I see a CBS News segment, and I'm like, oh, that looks familiar, all about the traffic on Rahway Avenue, where parents are interviewed, the crossing guard is interviewed, and they're all talking about how bad the situation is at Edison. So I know I'm not the only one seeing this. And as a mom, I can tell you firsthand, it's a terrible feeling to be walking your little one to Tamaqua and know you have older ones at Edison, and as parents start to arrive, say, oh my gosh, I just passed Edison, there's an ambulance, a kid was hit by a car. It's like, you can't move and process fast enough to wondering if that's your child. And I don't think that parents should have to be doing that and should have to be worrying about that. I know of at least 3 incidents of kids being hit by cars, 3 kids, 2 incidents in front of Edison, and 1 year the former crossing guard was hit twice in 1 year. So, I mean, I grew up in a suburb in New Jersey. I don't think in my whole career I knew of anybody, any classmate getting hit by a car. Now, this is at least 4 times in a few years. And I'm afraid now the situation is getting worse, and now there's the crossing guard shortage, there's a strain on police, and I'm just afraid this is going to be the perfect storm. So I'm just asking, please, can we try and figure out something, somehow to make this area safer before we really do end up with a tragedy on our hands? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kristen Sonic-Schmeltz, 735 Harding Street. I'm running for the Board of Education also. I'd like to thank Dr. Gonzalez for your thorough response to Mrs. Wiggins and to Mr. Bonaccio. Now that we have data on the effectiveness of masks and the importance of spacing when possible and the helpfulness of being outside, it's my hope that we do not need to revert back to the full-time and/or hybrid remote learning that we saw in the 2020-2021 school year. And while I understand that the provided health-related school closure prepared plan was to fill a state requirement and that it's impossible to anticipate every scenario, I'm hoping that we can use this opportunity to create this document as a means for us to look at the details so that we're better prepared in the future. What I'd like to see is the community be more involved by us hosting separate focus groups for K through 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12 to hear from a broader group of parents so that we know what worked and what didn't work. Of particular concern to me is that the high school is going to be in a 9-period day. I heard so many complaints from the high school parents regarding our remote learning, but the one thing that seems to be very clear is that they actually really liked the block scheduling. So many parents have asked me, can we go back to block scheduling? So much so that I've reached out to Mrs. Aspendis and found out that, in fact, the high school is looking at that. So this plan seems to me to say that maybe we didn't involve parents and students in producing it. And then finally, I'd like to know if, more importantly right now, if we've examined the current district data to see how our current students who have had to quarantine either due to a COVID exposure or a diagnosis, how they're actually doing with the kind of remote learning that we are providing at this moment. Of particular concern to me would be our kindergarten and elementary school students, because they're not as independent, and I want to make sure they're getting what they need. Thank you.
First time at a board meeting. I have 2 questions I want to pose. Oh, I'm sorry. Robert O'Mara, 1725 Central Avenue. First question. Recently, Merrick Garland, the Attorney General of the Biden administration, sent out a memorandum stating he was ordering the FBI and other government departments to investigate alleged threats against school officials by parents. The Attorney General's memorandum was in reply to a letter sent to the Biden administration by the National School Board Association, NSBA, alleging threats and violence at school board meetings. 2 national school board associations have already commented on the NSBA letter to the Biden administration, and a number of local school boards have also commented on these 2 memorandums. The question I put to the board, first question, and the second one will be a lot shorter. Does this board have any comments, or have they made public and to the public any views, your view on these 2 memorandums? And the second question I have is, does the 1619 project, is that taught in Westfield school system? Thank you.
Kyle George, 605 Short Hills Court. Last BOE meeting, the BOE approved a resolution to certify the book Our Skin appropriate for use by a, quote, educated professional, end quote, on children at Lincoln School, which teaches 3 to 6-year-olds. The resolution accepting the report, among other things, as read in the meeting, cited unnamed and unlisted sources from the Smithsonian. Googling for pages on si.edu shows materials that look awfully like they were written by a CRT professor. In fact, one of them definitely is. Ms. Root, this week, over the last few weeks, I asked Dr. Gonzalez repeatedly via email to identify the sources that the committee that he appointed used. He was unable or unwilling to do so. This is unacceptable. Parents have a right to know this information. So now we're in a situation where nothing has changed. The book can still be used just like last school year. Nobody has been held accountable, and kids are still exposed to this awful book and the judgment that predicated its use in the first place. The quote-unquote educated professionals that will read the book, possibly to my daughter, who's a current kindergartner, are the same ones who decided to use it in the first place, trained by the 2020 CRT-based training co-authored and chaired by the current Lincoln principal. You no doubt want to stop talking about this. Believe it or not, so do I. But we can't because it's still a problem, and the underlying root cause hasn't been addressed. It will happen again. It's only a matter of time. Trust has been eroded. Parents should have full visibility into what their children are being taught. On this particular book, it should never be used again. And if you're going to use it, parents should be given notice and the option to opt out. Thanks.
Rob Bonaccio, 528 Forest. I could not possibly pass up an opportunity to join in the congratulations to Mrs. Whitehead on her retirement. My kids are Franklin School kids. One's still there, the other all the way through. Certainly my experience growing up with the school secretary was always that she was your best friend because all the stuff you forgot, she managed to take care of. Nothing really ever seemed so bad. And she always made my kids feel that way. So I want to congratulate her on her retirement as well. Just a truly wonderful person. There were a couple of things that came up during the course of the meeting, a couple of different comments on a few different things. One is there's committee reports that are given out on a regular basis, but we never seem to have those in advance. And I'm wondering if that's something we could start doing. Today, the long-term planning report addressed kindergarten, and that's something that's come up in a couple of candidate forums. And I think some parents probably would have been here maybe to give some thoughts or advice as you consider your deliberation if they would have known that was coming up. They won't know unless they come here first, and then we kind of backlog the last end of public comment, so I think that might be a helpful thing to engage in. Next is, it was stated earlier that one of the benefits of potentially bonding for construction of these new classrooms is that for referendums approved, we may be eligible for a 40% matching funds from the state. I think that's one reason, assuming that same eligibility is there for fields, one of many other reasons, frankly, to move on from this letter of intent. If that's not the case, that's fine, but certainly we should be considering that as we deliberate whether the Edison Field project as proposed is correct. I think and would submit that the better thing we should be doing is focusing on maintaining the fields as opposed to trying to jam us all into one patch of grass, albeit a very large one. You don't stop mowing your lawn because you got to fix your roof. So we want to make sure we have to allocate budgets for those. And last was the plan for in the event we need to shut down again. The plan did have something very specific about extracurriculars, saying we're not going to do them. So I want to make sure that we address that going forward on a technical basis. And while I definitely understand that there were limitations on the plan, there was a roadmap that was given. I coach softball. Where'd Mary go? She does too. And I always tell my kids, you don't wait for the grounder to come to you, right? You got to charge that ball. So I want to encourage this board to charge the ball. There's been a number of different, concerns raised about, clarity on what virtual learning means. What are we doing with our teachers? What is the current experience of our students right now, those who are being quarantined now, and seeing policy for now? And I think our goal should be not just to stop at the report, should take the data we have and plan ahead for the future. Nobody wants to think about that, but I will also tell you I'm in, I think it's my third 100th year storm since I moved to Westfield 12 years ago, and while I don't ever want to see that happen again, we got to face some realities here too. So the best time to plan is not when you're in the middle of the crisis, it's before it. So I'd encourage us, understanding what the scope was, let's look past it, which is what we tell our kids to do anyway. Thank you.
Hi, Lisa D'Onofrio, 1000 Seward Ave. Dr. Gonzalez, you could probably guess what I'm going to talk about. I have yet to talk about the COVID vaccine at the Board of Ed meetings, as I felt the subject was more appropriate for the Board of Health. At the June Board of Health meeting, I suggested that we all do our research because this vaccine was going to eventually impact our children and their school environment. Fast forward just a few months, and we're here. Our state, down to our local Board of Health and schools, are discriminating against those kids that haven't gotten this experimental shot. Despite what you may think, the COVID vaccine available in the U.S. is still not FDA approved. Our high school daughter was exposed. Actually, it happened at the last board meeting. I got the call at 9 o'clock at night in one of her classes 2 weeks ago, and she had to quarantine for 14 days with no option to test out, while those that were vaccinated were able to return to school the following day. Not only that, but the student that tested positive was back in school days before my daughter. She was perfectly healthy and isolated from school and sports, and she was devastated. This makes no sense, as countless studies show the vaccine does not prevent you from getting or spreading COVID. In fact, the viral load is equal in both the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. I understand, I do. I understand that we're following New Jersey state guidelines, and I want you to know that I'm doing my part in challenging our state representatives, but we need our educators and our health advisors advocating for our kids as well. I'm sharing this to not only make parents aware of this protocol, but also ask that our schools rethink their education plans for those that are forced to quarantine. And at a minimum, those children should be given the option to remotely listen into their academic classes to ensure that they're not missing valuable lessons. I would like to see our district argue for our kids to be able to provide a negative test to return to school, just like we do everywhere else, especially since our vaccination rates in Westfield are at 90% for those 12 and older. Lastly, regarding the COVID vaccine, I just want to quickly mention the VAERS database. I talk about this a lot at the Board of Health meetings. It's co-managed by the FDA and the CDC since 1990, and it has been our guideline that tracks adverse effects and deaths from all vaccines. A Harvard study estimated that only 1% of all events and deaths are actually reported, so the numbers are very conservative. As of October 8th, there are over 16,700 deaths, 24,000 permanently disabled, and 9,400 myocarditis reports from the COVID vaccine. There are more deaths from this vaccine in just 10 months than in 16 years of all vaccines combined. This is not normal and is illustrated in a chart that I've printed out for all of you. To put it in perspective, normal vaccine rollouts of this size would be pulled from the market for under 100 deaths, as was done with the swine flu after 25 deaths. Okay, thank you.
Hi, Mary Wickens, 111 Tudor Oval. First, I had a couple of questions about the kindergarten plans. They just popped into my head when you guys were speaking about it. So, if I heard 14 rooms, and I was curious if what the plans would be for Lincoln after those 14 rooms were built. Is that still going to be kindergarten also? You're saying yes. Okay. Just curious. Would there be any rooms out of those 14s maybe to possibly bring back art and music rooms into the elementary schools? You don't have to answer me, just throwing it out there. And also, are there any rooms being considered for like adding more pre-K to our district, and any additional special needs classes that self-contained, that maybe we can bring kids back into the district that are out of district. So those are my questions about the kindergarten. And I also wanted to share that in my district, I'm in Piscataway, which is a very diverse town, that we just had a PD on DEI today. And I just wanted to share what we were learning about today, because I think it's great for all, districts to share their information. So what we were talking about today was DEI is exactly what the previous speaker wants. It's about celebrating differences and not dividing them. It's not a curriculum. It's designed to be a model for teachers to learn about their students and their families, and also their colleagues. To learn about their individual differences as they relate to cultures, disabilities, race, gender, and sexual orientation, and then use that information to adjust teaching and to make all types of students more successful. For those in the audience worried about DEI or worried about the new history curriculum, I strongly suggest you look on the Department of Ed website and the Westfield website for the most accurate and factual information about the new curriculum and how these ideas are presented in there. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jill Baker. I live on Baker Avenue. So I'm still upset by the last vote on the Erskine book, that it was approved for multiple reasons, including its age inappropriateness. It's just stunning to me that it was approved for multiple reasons. So I have a 6-year-old that's in the schools, and I had a problem with that book because I didn't think it was age appropriate. And then my son came home with another book this year that I felt like was age inappropriate for his being 6 years old. Luckily, he can't read yet, which I wouldn't say luckily to in any other circumstance, except for the fact that my husband and I were able to skip over this book that he brought home from his elementary school library. Certain sections that we found would probably really upset him. When I did reach out to the school, I eventually got a response that if I could have a conversation at home with my son, so he understands expectations as to what books should be brought home for a first grader. That was the response that I got regarding this book. So I'm just going to read some excerpts from this book. It was about Babe Ruth. He loves baseball. He's 6. So in here it says, my father got kicked in the head in a fight outside his saloon and died when he was 46. And then there was another section. We were playing Cleveland in 1920. Their little shortstop, Ray Chapman, didn't see a pitch coming at him. It busted his skull. He crumpled like a rag doll right in the batter's box. I saw it with my own eyes. A few hours later, Chapman was dead. So if you don't mind, kid, I'm going to have a smoke. Later on in the book. My grandparents lived in Lodz in central Poland near Warsaw, Dad explained. A quiet little city. It must have been one crazy house with all 13 of them living together. The Nazis invaded Poland in September of 1939. Little by little, they started rounding people up. In 1944, they took my grandparents away, the children too. Only my father escaped by hiding under the house. The Nazis sent the rest of the family to Treblinka, a concentration camp. They were all killed in the gas chambers. My dad somehow made it to America. I don't know how exactly. I luckily skipped over these sections for my 6-year-old son. We're very, I did read the part to him where the baseball player died from being hit in the head with a fastball, and the next day he couldn't stop talking about it. He didn't want to play baseball anymore. He was devastated. And I just don't understand why this keeps popping up with my 6-year-old with these books that seem so age inappropriate and aren't being dealt with within this district. So thank you.
Hello, Dominique Venezia, 118 Wyoming Street. Currently, no public health emergency has been declared by our New Jersey Health Commissioner. School boards are not under any obligation to discipline students on Governor Murphy's behalf, and schools technically have no legal authority to quarantine children, especially based on faulty PCR testing results. These particular tests that we rely so much on are being phased out this coming January for their inability to diagnose infectious diseases, particularly differentiating between influenza A or B, any one of the 7 types of coronaviruses, adenovirus or rhinovirus, often yielding 98% false positivity rates, depending on the ever-changing cycle thresholds that the labs are using. We all need to know and understand our rights as citizens, especially in a state where a governor has unilaterally decided to conceal any and all medical and scientific data to justify imposing executive orders. He has decided to invoke executive privilege to block the public from seeing this evidence. He's in federal court right now, having to justify his not-so-transparent decision-making. Meanwhile, the COVID narrative is unraveling. We are seeing scientists at the FDA jump ship and resign along with the current NIH director. They have expressed grave concerns and will no longer accept the official narrative as data continues to accumulate that strongly opposes it. The importance of Black Lives Matter is now more relevant than ever. Just today, New York City Board of Health declared racism as a public health crisis. New York recognizes an overwhelming number of Black and Latino citizens refusing to submit to government-mandated vaccines, especially after decades of being used as testing subjects for experimentation, as was the case in Tuskegee, and massive numbers of Black boys suffering severe cognitive and neurological damage from receiving childhood vaccines according to the CDC schedule. Listen to Dr. William Thompson from the CDC about that point. We must support medical freedom in the BLM movement along with courageous NBA players like Kyrie Irving and Jonathan Isaac, or musical talents like Nicki Minaj and Rihanna, as they are seen as role models to all, including our Black youth. Their message is clear. They will not participate in one-size-fits-all medicine. They believe, as we all do, we have God-given inherent freedoms and individual rights to make informed medical decisions over groupthink, consensus science, and the for the greater good mantra. This is the Great Awakening. We are no longer a minority, but a very large vocal majority, spreading truth and peacefully speaking out, giving others support to unify, be brave, and to share their stories. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Dawn Tim. I'm from 221 Calverthwaite Place. I won't take long. I share a similar experience with my high school students as Lisa did with hers. It upset me to no end that my son had to quarantine because he came in close contact with someone, and even though he tested negative, he couldn't come back to school. Now, I've done my research as well, and I've learned that the school nurse can advocate for testing, for students to be able to test back in through the Westfield Department of Health. So I too am asking you, begging you, advocate for our kids. They shouldn't have to stay home with no real opportunity to learn when they aren't sick. Thank you.
Ashnangia, 526 Hillcrest Avenue. I got a copy of y'all's favorite book here, Our Skin. You know, it's funny, I showed this to some progressive friends of mine, and they were pretty shocked by the content of this book. One of them even called it outright racism, which I gotta say I agree with, but I guess you guys don't agree with that. So I think tonight, so everybody can hear it, I'm gonna read this into the record. A long time ago, way before you were born, a group of white people made up an idea called race. They sorted people by skin color and said that white people were better, smarter, prettier, and that they deserve more than everybody else. That isn't true or fair at all, but it's a story that's been told a long time. Racism is also the things people do and the unfair rules they make about race so that white people get more power and are treated better than everybody else. Racism happens in lots of big and small ways. It's all around us, even if we don't notice it. By marching in protest, by singing songs that bring us together, by changing unfair rules, by teaching, helping, learning, and listening, we can do it too. And on this page, here's a child holding up a poster for Black Lives Matter. Let's move on. Even babies notice skin color. Children as young as 6 months categorize people by skin color, and by 3 years, they may start to demonstrate racial bias. You may have learned that race is a social construct, but what does that really mean, and how do you explain it? Race is an idea that emerged in modern times and has no basis in biology or science. Racial categories were invented to advantage white people and to justify slavery, colonialism, and genocide. Call out racism as it manifests in your own lives and continue to discuss this openly with your children. This will help them do the same as they grow. And I love this part. Racism is baked into the culture of the United States. Let me say it again. Racism is baked into the culture of the United States. In order to undo this system, we must actively participate in anti-racist efforts. Folks, this book is a disgrace. At the beginning of this session, we stand up and we salute that flag. And yet you're teaching these children that racism is based into the culture of the United States. Teach the kids the faults of this country, but teach the kids that this is the greatest country on the face of the earth. Has been and will always be.
Hello, Eric Kolchinsky, 94 Barchester Way. I am also running for the council, the board, sorry, not the council, the board. We didn't completely coordinate this, but when I saw Ashwa has the book, I just wanted to jot them some notes about this. So both, as I've been talking about this a couple of times, there's a legal and a moral aspect to this. So this book, as Ashwa is obviously illegal, right? It creates a hostile learning environment, without a doubt. So if you want to, in terms of the actual, it has to be severe or persuasive or pervasive under Third Circuit jurisdiction. You can read Castleberry, the STI group. That's under Title VII, the employment law, but they're very often the same. So clearly, the board is now on notice that there is pervasive, hostile learning environment, and please do not do these things again. I know you don't want to, but this is quite racist. So as people said, DI it can be great, absolutely, or it can be completely racist, like the book. So far, you want us to trust you, the parents that trust you do the right thing. What we've seen so far is that racist side of D&I. So let me talk a little bit about the moral part of the book, right? It talks about white people created racism, right? Who are these white people? How do they relate to the white students in the class? Was it my ancestors who lived in the shtetl, in the Pale of Settlement? Was it the ancestors of the penniless shepherds from Sicily who came here with nothing? The ancestors of the people escaping from the potato famine? Those are the three largest groups here in Westfield. Was that the people who, should the kids feel something for those white people who created race? Is that what you're telling them? See, that sets up one of the worst worst moral sins you can get, and that's generational guilt. There's many examples. I'm Jewish, I'm familiar with the worst, obviously for my own, right? It's maybe not the worst one, but to me, to my history. Many of my ancestors, or maybe ancestors, were killed in Europe because of generational guilt, where they were told to be guilty for something maybe somebody like them did in the past. That's immoral. Now, you may be saying, no, we're doing this for a good cause. Anti-racism is a good cause. Well, I can assure you, every communist, every Nazi, every inquisitor always believed that they were doing the right thing. Stalin was a true believer. He believed he was building communism. So most of you, I think, have grown up in a peaceful, nice American society. So take it from somebody who's a refugee, truly a refugee. This kind of thing, generational guilt, let me finish, please, very quick. Yep, goes down the wrong path. Please do not take it. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ashley Hu, and I live on 46 Faulkner Drive. So first I want to talk about the Edison Field Plan, and I just want to say that from a perspective of the student, we really want to consider the health of the kids who are playing on the field. Therefore, I really don't think the environmental impact and the health impact of the field is good for us, because the plastics that are on this field are carcinogens, and they produce toxic fumes, which is really bad for both people and the environment. And also, when we don't have grass, it causes the earth to heat up more, and it causes more runoff, which causes more toxins to enter the water, which will affect all of us one day, which is why I am against the turf fields. And I know a lot of people complain about the natural grass, which I agree. Currently, it's not great, but that's not because of grass itself, but the way that we manage it. So I think that if we put more money towards managing this field better, instead of just completely building a new one, we could have a healthier and a better field with higher quality. And I wanted to talk about the book that everyone is a little angry about, and I just want to say that from a perspective of a student who has to deal with the people who have gone through the Westfield education system, I think racism is still a thing. And the status quo is not working, because we cannot just ignore a problem and expect people to just not be racist. And it's true that babies will try to form groups with other babies because people like working with others, and oftentimes this leads to racism. And I think that we have to teach them to be conscious of others and to respect color early on, so they don't develop these discriminatory thoughts. And I think when the book says that white people invented racism, I don't think they're saying that we should blame the white kids in the classroom. What they're saying is that currently in America, the racism that we experience does stem from the white people who live here because they were originally here. Now, of course, racism, like, I'm Chinese, and I know Chinese people who are racist, and that we're not saying that white people are the only racist ones. But in America, when white people are the majority, it's true that a lot of the racism stems from them. And the book's purpose is not to blame anyone. It says to bring people together, and that's what the purpose is. So I think we have to acknowledge that we have to teach people young to respect each other, and we have to acknowledge an issue before it starts to form. Because if you ignore it, it will develop, and I currently do experience like racism in my environment, so that proves that the education system has not prevented racism. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Cynthia Lee. I live on 569 Pearson Street. I'm here today to join the discussion surrounding the Board of Education's diversity, equity, and inclusion goal. I've listened to and considered the concerns brought up by parents on this topic, and I want to challenge some of these points. Many parents have said that children 5 to 8 are not ready to hear about the topic surrounding race. I wish for these parents to consider that while they want to set limits to the age at which children can start learning about race, for other children of color, 5 years old is certainly not too young for them to experience racism from both adults and other children of their age. From my personal experience as a 5-year-old in Westfield, I've had classmates recite racist rhymes to me, one in particular that started with Chinese, Japanese, and was paired with matching hand motions where they pulled back their eyes to mock the way I looked. I've had classmates beg me to say something in Chinese, only to immediately afterward laugh and make fun of the way the language sounded. I've had classmates come up to me and tell me that my food was disgusting just because it looked and smelled different from the food that they were used to. I remember the outcome of this experience. At one point, I was too embarrassed to eat at school, and for a while, I just starved for the whole day just so I wouldn't have to respond to the comments of these classmates. What may be more significant is that these examples aren't even that bad on the spectrum of experiences that children of color face in America. In fact, my experiences, such as the lunchbox shaming incident, are so common that it's become somewhat of a cliche. My point here is that if some kids are old enough to experience racism, then it should only make sense that their classmates who are the same age should be old enough to learn about it. Though, just to be clear, I do not believe that the actions of my classmates stemmed from a place of hate. Rather, I think it stemmed from a place of ignorance of the way that their words and actions would affect others. So I believe that the best way to combat this would be to expose them to proper education on the subject, like the Board of Education is doing right now. Another point that I have commonly heard brought up is that the actions of Americans of the past have nothing to do with those of the present Americans, so children today should not be responsible for it. This can be true, but it is also necessary to consider that the children of today inherit the world with all its flaws and governing systems. They may not have created the problems surrounding race and inequality, but the problems are still there regardless, and since it is our country now, it is our responsibility to address these problems. Parents of Westfield, please consider that children of color are your children too. So please give value to our feelings and experiences when forming your opinions on our changing curriculum. Thank you.
Hi, Jen Andretta, 722 Warren Street. Recently, the National School Boards Association asked the FBI to label parents protesting educational policies at school board meetings as domestic terrorists. There have been 11 states so far that have come out and said, we don't believe parents that disagree are domestic terrorists. Those states are New Hampshire, Texas, Pennsylvania, Florida, Arkansas, Missouri, Montana, North Carolina, Tennessee, Louisiana, and Virginia. And I bring this up because we're trying to all welcome diverse opinions here. I think that's super important. I don't believe anybody is acting or threatening or being a domestic terrorist. So perhaps if Westfield spoke out to the New Jersey School Board Association and said, could we disavow that we believe parents are domestic terrorists that disagree? We want to welcome their diverse opinions. It's just a suggestion. Thank you.
Anything you'd like to address, Dr. Gonzalez?
I'd like to comment on one thing.
Okay.
Can we go to that now?
Sure.
The traffic incident situation, I almost hit a teenager on the way to this board meeting. She ran right across the front of my car to get into Chipotle, and I was moving, half looking at her phone, didn't even consider if there was a car coming. I just want to reiterate what that one speaker said, and that I agree that we're in a very serious situation with these kids because they haven't been out and about like this. They were in COVID, they were in lockdown. I would like to request, if possible, and I know it's very short notice, but that we try, even possibly tomorrow morning, to integrate into announcements at every school to remind these students about safety in the street. Because God forbid we have an incident where somebody gets hurt or worse. I think we need to do everything we can immediately. It was very scary driving here for me to almost hit her. And I really think it's very important that we do something as quickly as possible. Okay? Thank you.
I'm sorry? No, I was just going to say, when we received the letter from the resident who spoke tonight, I reached out to Councilman Mike Dardia, who's the head of the Public Safety Committee, and we've already started talking about it. And Dr. Gonzalez had drafted a reply to the constituent. He just hasn't had a chance to send it back yet.
That's great. That's like the top down, but I want the students to be reminded to make sure they're taking care of themselves while we're figuring out how to also put additional measures in place on the streets from the police and from the district. I think the kids just need to be more cognizant. They ride their bikes looking at their phones. They don't wear helmets. They run in the streets. We don't want anything to happen.
Right.
So I'm just saying, if we can remind the students, just through morning announcements, to be mindful and careful in the streets, I think we're doing everything we can, as fast as we can.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Okay, thanks for the suggestion.
Sure.
Okay.
Actually, on that note, as Mrs. Root pointed out, just in preparing a response, I was waiting for my meeting with the secondary principals, which is scheduled for tomorrow, to discuss this exact topic, among others, but it was perfectly timed to be added to the agenda. So certainly there are things that are within our realm, and educating our students is part and parcel of what we certainly have the ability to do. So I look forward to working with our elementary, middle, and high school principals in this endeavor. In addition, just some of the things that were referenced regarding both, the feedback from our community, our parents and our students on their experience during remote learning. Currently, how students are doing is certainly something that I want to continue to work with our principals to gather in order for us to see ways that we could potentially improve our delivery services and certainly respond to student needs. So I will, again, reach out to my principals and work with them to start soliciting that formally as well as informally. Whenever there are students who are out, I want to make sure that we're touching base with them, not just through the teachers, but also through our nurses, counselors, and administrators to ensure that our students are doing well. And if there's ways we could support them further, I'd like to find out during their experience rather than after. So we could certainly do a better job of soliciting that more formally as we continue to move forward, but I don't see a problem with the willingness on the part of our schools. There were questions regarding getting committee reports in advance, and I think the one thing about the committee reports, and I don't mean to speak on behalf of the board, but certainly in both my experience here and in prior districts, the great thing about committee reports is that they are public insight into what is being discussed and not what has been decided. So the ability to hear the reports as they are being presented is really the opportunity for the public to have that insight and at future meetings be able to respond. So as demonstrated tonight, sometimes our committee meetings happen the night of the meeting, so advanced reports would not be possible, but they are intended to be ongoing conversations about things that are presented to the board for consideration by the administration, or likewise things presented by the board to the administration for our consideration. So the work that we're doing will continue to try and gather that feedback during public comment and during the presentation of our board committee reports. With regards, as mentioned, there are questions about what the full day plans include or don't include, and I think that is certainly the directive that we received this evening is to gather all that information and to be able to revisit that, to be able to have a more formal and comprehensive conversation about what had been discussed in the past, what still is a possibility that could be on the table today, and certainly as we refine those discussions moving forward. So I'm looking forward to, as the new superintendent, I won't be able to say that much longer, but still new enough right now that there are many aspects of the full day kindergarten endeavor that I want to make sure I'm fully up to speed on in order to properly inform the discussion as much as possible. And then there was Oh, there was a question with regards to the 1619 project, whether or not that's taught in our school system. I don't know the answer as to whether any resources from the 1619 project are in any way found in any of our curricular or courses, but that's certainly something I could find out, in working with the high school to see if there's any elements of the resources of that project in any of our curriculum. And that concludes my responses.
Okay. And just a point that I'd like to clarify, we've had a couple of speakers who say that that our vote to affirm the book review committee's recommendation at our last meeting is a vote to continue using this book all the time in classrooms is not accurate. The recommendation of the book review committee was that the book would be used only in connection with an approved lesson plan, which actually had not happened previously, but so if it would happen in the future, there would be more of an opportunity for teachers to collaborate with supervisor, potentially with principal, as to how exactly the book would be used, if it would be used going forward. So just an important distinction that I think might be helpful. Thank you to the resident who read portions of the book out loud. It was not the book in its entirety, but certainly parts of the book that some people have had some concerns with. And as I said when we met last time, I think having the book available for teachers to see what some people are concerned about or what might be problematic would be helpful for them to help devise lessons that would teach the subjects in the manner in which more people are comfortable and willing to receive the information that is being taught in the class. So I wanted to say that. I also wanted to say that we welcome public input at our meetings. I don't regard anyone currently in the meeting as a domestic terrorist of any kind. We do welcome the interplay of ideas. I know not everyone agrees with everything we do, but that's what public comment is for you guys to share your thoughts, and we can give feedback sometimes on the spot, and sometimes it takes a little while for us to determine what we need to do or how we might need to address something that's been raised at one of our meetings. So we do value your input, and we welcome you joining us at these meetings.
If I could just add a clarification.
Please.
There were numerous comments made about the National School Board Association's letter to the president asking for FBI assistance. It specifically calls out threats of violence and lists a handful of actual acts of violence against school officials, not just school board members, but people working for the district, including incidents where people, when asked to put on a mask, spit in somebody's face. They're asking for FBI assistance, mostly when it comes to death threats, because they mostly come through electronic means that local police they don't have the resources to tap into. So. Yep, so it has nothing to do with a difference of opinion. It's where it crosses that line into threats of violence or actual violence.
Good distinction.
And as a delegate of the New Jersey School Boards Association, it came up at our board of directors meeting, and it's something that New Jersey stands behind, is federal assistance where it can be helpful. We have a long history of working well in New Jersey with the FBI, being so close to New York.
But also that New Jersey doesn't, but to Ms. Andretta's point, that New Jersey School Boards is not at all saying that we are viewing people who differ from the beliefs of others, regardless of which side of the podium or whatever they're on. It's welcome and accepted.
Yeah, until that opinion turns into a threat of violence against a member of the public or an elected official or employee of the district.
Good point. Okay. Any other comments from board members?
Can I just reiterate about the book?
And the approved lesson piece one more time, just so I'm clear, because I know after last meeting, a lot of parents were extremely upset. Some were in tears, feel like they're putting their child in an abusive situation, and don't want their children exposed at all to this material. And just to clarify, not because they don't feel comfortable speaking about race that's been very misrepresented in the media. It's not anything about talking about race with those age groups. It's about teaching them about white supremacy and that white people created racism. That's what the issue is. So I hope that's very, very clear to everybody, That's what the issue is. But I want to make sure, because the confusion is that it was an approved lesson, at least that's how it was interpreted last year, because there was a permission slip and it was part of a lesson. So can you just explain the distinction between that approved lesson and now moving forward, what would need to happen for the book to be used in Lincoln School?
Well, I think my understanding, and it highlights that there may be some changes going forward. I think we've talked about some of the policies that we would like to review as guidance for our own staff members and for community members that we'll be looking at over the coming months to help make things a little more clear, is to help provide additional guidance to staff that, obviously this one particular book has got a lot of public comment. A lot of people have concerns about it. So I think before anything like this book were to be considered for use at any particularly lower grade level, there would need to be some more robust conversations. And I think the content supervisors and the teachers are aware of that. I would assume that these would be ongoing conversations that would be held either at staff meetings or the like, where people at the individual schools, particularly the elementary schools, would have further conversations. And as we have said at the beginning, that part of making professional development and curriculum development to follow the state's mandate about teaching DEI, that will be rolling forward throughout the school year. We'll be hearing reports periodically from Dr. Gonzalez or perhaps from other members of the staff to help explain what kind of guidance we are giving our teachers and what they can be relying on. But I think it's fairly safe to say that people have heard the complaints, and anything that would go forward would be very careful about how this subject matter would be addressed.
Okay, but this particular book, there's no current approved lesson, correct? So it will not be used until that happens. That's what I'm looking for, a yes or no on that.
That's correct. And
Thank you.
at this point, if it would be used.
And are we making a policy where it would need approval from the superintendent before it's used in a lesson plan? I know we're changing the policies, I'm just trying to understand.
We're going to be looking at the policies over the next couple policy committee meetings with various stakeholder groups. It's not going to be done in one meeting, but it will require a higher level of approval. We haven't decided whether that's the superintendent or curriculum supervisor, or to what degree it would need an approval.
Well, just the concern about the supervisor level is that how this book originally came in, and I think the superintendent, in a sense, reports to the board and should have the ultimate decision-making authority on that. And, it's just, I'm reiterating my comment from the last meeting, there's 600-700 books when you search on Amazon for diversity books, and I think we should set this book aside and look at those other 600 or 700 books before we go and consider this book.
My microphone doesn't like me. That's exactly what was determined, that this book is being set aside and not going to be used if it's going to be used in any such way, there will be an approved curriculum, an approved lesson plan. So it's going to be set aside, and other books are going to be looked on. See, doesn't like me.
We hear you, though. We get it.
Okay.
Yes, Rob?
Amy, if I may, we've gone through this a number of times now, and I think it's pretty clear where we're going, what we've done, moving forward, what was done before the review was requested. But also, I do not want our district to fall into a situation where discussions like this have a chilling effect of us effectively teaching DEI and talking about issues that people may not like. We're not about banning books. We're not about trying to censor what teachers say simply because someone or a couple parents may have had an issue with it. We're setting policies, we're setting procedures, we have policies, we have procedures. Exactly what took place and the response to it has been according to what our policies are based on. And so I commend the district for what they did. We did have the policies in place, and then the discussions were had that took care of this situation. And I don't want to have a situation where there's a chilling effect where teachers may not want to teach certain things or talk about certain things simply because someone may think it's controversial. I don't want to have that situation.
Concerned with that. The issue with this is this specific.
It's my comment, and I'm telling you what, I
That's
got
fine
it. I understood what you said,
I don't know
and I
if you did
responded.
based on what you just said.
No, I did. I absolutely
It
did.
didn't look like it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, the public comment time is over. Next meeting, we'd be happy to hear from you. Did you want to say something, Gretchen? No. Okay, all right. Okay. Yeah, I think we can move on. We've heard you, really, we have, honestly. Okay. And now I think I've lost my screen and the thing I need to read, so. Yeah. Thanks. Okay. That's okay. It doesn't need to be that big. Okay. Yeah, point taken. Okay. I think the board is ready to move on. Okay. We do have to move into a private session, and so I would like the board to approve the following resolution. Be it resolved that the Board of Education move into private session for the purpose of discussing matters rendered confidential by state and federal law, including harassment, intimidation, and bullying incidents, and be it further resolved that any discussion held by the board which need not remain confidential, and the results of the discussion will be made public as soon as practicable. Can I have a second? Thanks, Sonal. All in favor of moving to private session?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thank you for joining us, everyone. We do hear you, I promise.